Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome to another episode of Battling 101 Basics. Today we're going to be talking about 50-50s, identifying 50-50 situations, and when you should just consider the different consequences of each move in the 50-50. So right here we have a Bisharp, one of the most common 50-50 invokers in the overused metagame, and we have this up against a Starmie. Now my opponent's team is Mega Gardevoir, Weavile, Starmie, Talonflame, and Diggersby. We both have Stealth Rocks on the field. And the thing is, should we use Knockoff or should we use Sucker Punch? And I'll just tell you straight up that the answer is yes, we should use Sucker Punch, and I'll tell you why. We have Mega Aerodactyl, and my opponent has Weavile. These are key components to the outcome of the game because Mega Aerodactyl is essentially our win condition. With Stealth Rocks up on the field, Stone Edge just kills his entire team save for Diggersby, which is one hit KO'd by Aqua Tail. And on the flip side, with Stealth Rocks up in his field, Ice Shard will just kill my Mega Aerodactyl because it does about 75% to Mega Aerodactyls. So I gotta watch out for that. I gotta eliminate the Weavile before bringing in my Mega Aerodactyl to clean. So knowing this, I want to keep my Bisharp alive, and that's the main priority here. It's not whether I win the 50-50 right in this one particular instance. It's whether I can keep my Bisharp alive so I can get chip damage with Life Orb recoil from my opponent's Weavile so I can kill it. Because that's going to be my main form of weakening the Weavile. Now you see here that Bisharp is my only Dark and Ice resist, so yeah, I'm just reiterating the point here that I want my Bisharp alive. That's the main priority, and because of this, I'm going to use Sucker Punch and not Knockoff. Because I really don't care if, I don't get the kill on this Diggersby. I just want to make sure that my Bisharp stays alive, so I'm just going to go for the Sucker Punch. Now my opponent makes a great play here. He doubles into Weavile, he traps my Gengar. That's fine, I'll let him do that. That gives him some more chip damage. He's at 66% now. I'm going to force him out with the Talonflame, and he has no flying resist, so yeah, this is a hyper offensive team, so he's just going to be taking a lot of damage from Talonflame and my Brave Bird. He's going to bring in the Weavile right now to clean my Talonflame, but I recognize this, and because I kept my Bisharp alive, I can just switch it in, just whittle it down. It's at 31%, meaning that it's switched out. So next time it comes in, it takes 25% from Stealth Rock, and then it takes an additional 10% from Life Orb, so it can only do one attack. And that's great, because now I can just sweep with Mega Aerodactyl because Weavile is no longer an imminent threat to my team. So I'm just going to stack the Talonflame right here, and right now, this is game, because I can bring in the Aerodactyl clean, and he really has nothing to fend off against my Aerodactyl. Yeah, I can just clean right now, and this is all because I kept my Bisharp alive. I went for the Sucker Punch, realizing that I wanted my Bisharp alive. I didn't want to risk using Knockoff and my opponent using Hydro Pump in order to kill off my Bisharp. I did not want to take that risk. You have to recognize that risk, and so I was able to keep my Bisharp alive even though my opponent recognized my Sucker Punch and switched out accordingly. Now, this isn't really much of a 50-50 situation, even though on the surface it looks like a 50-50 situation. Most 50-50 situations, I'd say, are late game when the game is on the line. And let me illustrate this point to you with a matchup that was very common in XY overused pre-Aegislash ban. So we have a weakened Talonflame. This is Swords Dance Talonflame, and we have an Aegislash right here. Now, the Aegislash has two options it can do. It can do King's Shield or it can do Shadow Ball. And on the flip side, Talonflame can do either a non-attack on the King's Shield, such as Swords Dance or Roost, or it can use Flare Blitz, predicting the Shadow Ball. So this is more of an instance of a 50-50, because if I use King's Shield, he can use Flare Blitz and I'll win the game, as shown here. So I'm going to King's Shield right now. My opponent's going to Flare Blitz, and this lowers its attack, so now I have the victory. Because Flare Blitz, apart from a crit, is not going to kill my Aegislash, and then I can just kill it off with a Shadow Ball. Now, here's another instance. If I use King's Shield, I'll use King's Shield right now. He's going to use Swords Dance. And because he used Swords Dance, I'll have to resort to King's Shield shenanigans, which probably won't work because he's at +2 attack. So this is an ideal example of a 50-50 where all the outcomes are highly probable and they can resort to a different outcome of the game. So right here, I can Shadow Ball, predicting the Swords Dance, right? Or I could Shadow Ball, right? Hold on one second. We're just recreating the scenario. So I can Shadow Ball on this turn, but on the flip side, my opponent can just recognize that and use Flare Blitz. So that's an example of an actual 50-50, a scenario where whatever move that each person uses, it can determine an outcome of the game. Whereas with the Bisharp example, the Bisharp versus Starmie example, where that was a little more early game, that was about turn 7, turn 8, it's not really a 50-50. You have to weigh the consequences of using knockoff, weigh the consequences of using Sucker Punch, and identify whether you need your Bisharp alive or you want that Starmie dead. Trying to figure out like which scenario is best for your late game execution. So essentially what 50-50s come down to a lot on the surface is risk versus reward. And when I'm talking about risk versus reward, I like to break it down visually into a table of 4 cells. Now obviously I don't do this while I'm playing games, this is all going on in my head. So when we're going to talk about the pros of knockoff versus Sucker Punch in the Bisharp versus Starmie matchup, we'll make a column, right? We'll say knockoff pros. What are the pros of using knockoff on the Starmie? And I'd say the pro is hitting a switch in hard. But do you value that more than the knockoff cons, which are essentially potentially losing Bisharp without beating Starmie? And I'd say personally, no. I want to keep my Bisharp, and I value my Bisharp being alive more than just hitting a random switch in hard, especially since I have Mega Aerodactyl to clean. On the flip side, we have Sucker Punch. What are the pros of using Sucker Punch? The pros of using Sucker Punch are beating a Starmie if it stays in, and Bisharp is alive no matter what, and that is the main thing for me, keeping my Bisharp alive so I can get chip damage on the Weavile. Now the Sucker Punch cons are, I just lose momentum as my opponent gets a free switch in if I predict incorrectly. And that's not a big deal because as long as I don't switch in my Aerodactyl, I should be fine, right? And here's an actual 50-50 because as you can see here, I'd say that the knockoff cons are really more important than anything else here. So I'd say it's more valuable to use Sucker Punch than using knockoff because the cons outweigh the pros for knockoff and the pros outweigh the cons for Sucker Punch. But in the Aegislash versus Talonflame example, the King's Shield pros and the Shadow Ball pros, they're pretty much the same. I win if my opponent uses Flare Blitz. I win if my opponent uses Swords Dance. The probability of my opponent uses both if he recognizes the situation are 50-50. It's an actual coin flip. And for King's Shield cons and Shadow Ball cons, they're about the same as well. I lose if my opponent sets up a Swords Dance. I lose if my opponent uses Flare Blitz. So you can see here, especially during late game where the consequences are win or lose, it's very, very equal in terms of probability, and that's when the coin flip really happens. So just be sure to not select moves willy-nilly, especially early game when the pros and cons aren't really about winning and losing. It's more about like maintaining and losing momentum, and if you can recover from that, which is what we saw in the Bisharp versus Starmie example. So that's about it for today. Thank you for listening for this episode of Battling 101 Basics. Don't forget to subscribe to the Smogon YouTube channel as well as my own channel, which is going to be somewhere in the description below. I'll see you guys next week. Peace out.